And just like that, it's finished. House of the Dragon Season 2 Episode 8 brings the show's sophomore outing to a close with a finale that's often great, but also frustrating in parts. There's a lot to get through in the finale, which reunites Rhaenyra with both Daemon and Alicent, sees King Aegon smuggled out of King's Landing by Larys Strong, and multiple visions that foreshadow a lot of doom. It has to wrap up some season-long arcs while also setting up House of the Dragon Season 3, and, for the most part, it successfully does just that. Rhaenyra Targaryen has already had brilliant scenes with both Daemon and Alicent in Season 2, the former in Episode 2, the latter in Episode 3, and we're treated to one more of each in the finale. Emma Darcy is always superb, but when the leads of House of the Dragon's cast come together, there's real magic.
Do you believe in magic?
I'll admit, I'm a sucker for Rhaenyra and Daemon conversing in High Valyrian, and clearly writer Sarah Hess is too. So I love their reunion at Harrenhal where, finally, he repledges his allegiance and bends the knee. Once again, these scenes are so well played by Darcy and Matt Smith, they bounce off one another so well, and there's a real spark. It's fiery and also a little funny. It serves to bring them back together and push their arcs forward as one, and these two together is something that's been sorely lacking in Season 2. The same can also be said for Darcy and Olivia Cook. What's really impressive, including in this conversation, is how they capture the versions of the characters they didn't even play. We feel their longing for a friendship that is long gone, the love that once existed turned to hate, and a hope that something still exists. There's a little petulance in Rhaenyra, like when she tells Alicent to go, but it also reverses their roles in a fantastic way. It's now Alicent, not Rhaenyra, who longs for freedom, who rebels against her duty. Rhaenyra, meanwhile, refuses to stray from the path she feels is ordained by the gods. I was a little wary of Alicent going to Dragonstone and how it might play out, in case it tried too hard to soften her edges or weaken her character. But I don't think it does that. It's clear where Alicent has gone wrong and why, but there's a real pathos, power and tragedy to their encounter that I ended up loving.
Love it.
Hate it. Love it.
Hate it.
House of the Dragon, like Game of Thrones before it, is built on character work, not epic battles or dragons flying across the sky. Those things are undeniably cool and, when done right, truly spectacular. But they need the character dynamics underpinning them for any of them to matter, and I'll almost always like it when we get a scene that's just 2 or 3 characters in a room with sharp dialogue and great actors playing off one another. We get several such scenes in House of the Dragon Season 2 finale. King Aegon and Larys Strong have emerged as one of the best pairings in the entire show, and perhaps the one that most captures the brilliant political machinations of Game of Thrones. Both of these characters have done monstrous things, and yet, the show has found a way to bring them together by their unified tragedies in a way that makes both more understandable without forgiving their previous sins. Similar is true for Sir Criston Cole in this episode, who gets to deliver a big speech about honour to Gwaine Hightower. Cole has long been the most loathsome guy, even on Team Green, but there's a sorrow and openness that's almost even earnest to Fabian Frankel's performance here that humanises him a lot more than the show has done previously. Alan of Hull's conversation with Corlys Velaryon does something similar too. Similar to Jacaerys Valyrian's outburst at Rhaenyra last week, it gives us a true understanding of what life was like growing up as a bastard, and given he didn't have any comforts, there's even more raw emotion to it. I'll admit, I'd grown tired of seeing Alan and Corlys in the same setting, having the same brief conversation week after week, but Alan finally cutting through the niceties makes it worthwhile.
If it was all worth it. Of course it fucking was.
Speaking of Jace, he was also part of some very good scenes this week, most notably his encounters with Ulf the White. They really highlighted a contrast between the Highborns and the small folk in the way we don't get to see too often, because it's rare to find them sat at the same table. House of the Dragon has often been a bit too self-serious, something Ulf even calls out when saying they could do it with a sense of humour, and that's exactly what he adds to the finale. There's a lot of other similar character moments that are excellent too, including a couple with Aemond and Helena Targaryen, which suggests that Ewan Mitchell and Fia Saban are an underused pairing. It doesn't all work though. The Tywin Lannister scenes with the Triarchy do have some humour and are a bit of fun, but given this is the finale and it's introducing new characters, I think there's probably too much of it on balance that could have gone elsewhere. One example would be Rhaena Targaryen, who has now had multiple similar scenes of her chasing a wild dragon in the Vale of Arryn. Her seeing the dragon at the very end was good, but spending more time with her in a way that truly expanded her character, or her sister Baela, who has also been rather overlooked, could have benefited not just this episode, but the season as a whole. House of the Dragon Season 2 saved Daemon's biggest vision for last as he sees into the future of Westeros, including the Three-Eyed Raven, a White Walker, and Daenerys Targaryen. I can see why they included it and how they try to connect it to Daemon's arc and why he bends the knee to Rhaenyra, but I'd have preferred the show to avoid so directly connecting to Game of Thrones. So many prequels often fall into the trap of doing too much to set up the part of the franchise that comes after them. This was something House of the Dragon's timeline was set to avoid, since there's such a large gap until Game of Thrones. Even Aegon the Conqueror's Song of Ice and Fire dream avoided it, as it was very much about how it affects the story at hand. This is doing the same thing in part, but because we actually see a White Walker and Daenerys, it's going a bit too far in linking them all together.
Are you sure that this is completely necessary?
Necessary?
Aegon's dream works as a motivation for Rhaenyra, fitting with her growing god complex and belief that she has a divine right to rule. It also carries a sense of tragic irony in that the prophecy Aegon used to unite the realm is currently destroying it. But then so overtly stretching that through the Three-Eyed Raven, which also connects to the next Game of Thrones spin-off, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, and then Dany is the kind of franchise servicing and overshadowing trick you'd expect from the MCU or Star Wars, and HBO should be wary of overdoing that. There's no getting away from the fact that a lot of House of the Dragon Season 2's finale is setting up Season 3, which itself comes after a lot of the real war starts now promises following on from Season 1. That may be well frustrating for some viewers, especially as I've seen several nothing's happened complaints, though I think there's pros and cons to it. For the most part, I think this season has largely delivered, and so much of the setup for Season 3 is earned and works. After all, we get a payoff to Rhaenyra and Daemon's arc, it's concluded the Dragonseed story, and a lot of the power dynamics have shifted in King's Landing, with Alicent's search for freedom, Aemond taking power, and King Aegon being forced to leave the city. At the same time, the montage that closes it out, accompanied by a truly epic score, does feel a little like a compromise, and that the show might have been better with a 10-episode season. Writer Sarah Hess told EW that it wasn't really their choice to have a truncated run, and I think you can feel a little bit of that in the finale. If this season were to conclude with, say, the Battle of the Gullet, it would probably make more sense. That isn't what we got though, and it's worth remembering just a few episodes ago we did get one of the most epic battle sequences in Game of Thrones history. Despite the problems, the setup for House of the Dragon Season 3 does feel exciting, even if there'll likely be another painful 2-year wait for it to pay off.
I don't wanna wait for our love to be over. I don't wanna wait.
And for the last time, the pros. Rhaenyra's conversation with Alicent Hightower is a great scene with excellent performances from Emma Darcy and Olivia Cooke. Similarly, Rhaenyra and Daemon's High Valyrian conversation cackles with electricity and fire. The scenes between King Aegon and Larys Strong are some of the show's best, with Game of Thrones-esque machinations. Various other characters have powerful moments, including Sir Criston Cole and Alan of Hull, and audibly, this is the best score of the season in the closing montage, and the rest of the production values are extremely high as usual. And the cons? The visions of the White Walker and Daenerys Targaryen were overkill in connecting House of the Dragon to the wider franchise. There's a lot of setup for Season 3, and while some of it's exciting, Season 2 would have benefited from more episodes. And a little bit too much time was spent on Tyrion Lannister, though the scenes were fun.